This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic!
What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is September 14th, 2023. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by the co-host Luke Sylvia. Luke, how are we doing?
Doing well. Doing well. Just continuing to count down the days, Jonathan.
Until what? The regular season starts?
Yeah, that media day, preseason, training camp, things that really get me going and get me on this mic twice a week for sure.
And a lot of you will be very surprised to hear, if you're not on YouTube, you don't see him yet. You'll hear him in just a moment. But we're joined by none other than producer Kevin Tucker. Producer Kevin Tucker, welcome back. How are you?
Wow. Greetings, gentlemen. Greetings, boys and girls. Thanks for listening to the show and watching the show. I'm doing very well. Glad to be back. Glad to talk a little Magic history with you boys as we count down the days to some live Magic basketball, which actually isn't that far away if you think about it. Like, we're really close. You know, it's kind of exciting.
We are close.
Kevin, how pumped are you to be doing the post-game lives?
I'm very excited. Like, I think it's going to be awesome. So if you missed that announcement, we've talked about it a couple times over the course of the summer, but I'm glad you brought this up, Jonathan. Yeah, we're planning on doing post-game shows after every Orlando Magic game this season live on YouTube. I'm going to be hosting as many of them as I possibly can. For the ones that I'm not available, Jonathan and Luke will do it. But yeah, it's going to be live on YouTube. We're going to get your reactions. You're going to get involved in the chat, in the comments, all that kind of stuff. We'll break down the game and the highs and lows of the entire Orlando Magic season. It'll be really fun. And then, of course, it'll also be available the next day on, podcast platforms and everything like that. So it's going to be a lot. Like, it's kind of daunting to think about. But, I mean, I'm already watching and reacting to games anyway, so might as well just join in with a bunch of other Magic fans doing it. So I'm really excited.
Since last month when the schedule came out, like everyone knows, if you listen to our episode that we released the next day, we were just pouring over that schedule. And as we're putting it together and we're putting together like the Google Calendar, I don't know the last time either of you took a look at that, but we're sort of upping the coverage all over the place. Like, we're going to try to be at more Magic games, have more coverage at Magic games. Got Ben doing the Sixth Fan Show, Kevin doing most of the post-game lives, obviously still recording twice a week. Like, there's going to be a lot going on, more than ever before for us in particular next season. So it is a little bit daunting, but mostly it's exciting because we should be watching good Magic basketball for the first time in a really long time.
Please. Yeah, the idea of doing 82 post-game shows of, like, let's say the 2022 Magic, like, that would have been brutal. So I just don't want that again. That's all I want. Like, 40 wins or more would just, the rest would be great. But yeah, if we could just have a good team, those post-game live shows will be much more tolerable and a lot of fun.
We've talked about this the last couple of episodes, but we should have a link like relatively soon for this group night that we're putting together for when the Magic take on the Oklahoma City Thunder at home on February 13th. That is a Tuesday night, and that is when the Magic are going to be, fingers crossed, playing on TNT. Like, they're one real nationally televised game this year. So we should be getting that link, I think, sometime this week, if not early next week. And then we'll start pushing that to you guys as soon as possible. So please keep your eyes on that because seats are going to be limited. We try to make this really affordable. So there's a chance that these tickets are going to go fast. So when you see the post that we put the link out, don't drag your feet. Just go and get your tickets. We want you guys to be there. That's going to be a lot of fun. We do have some sad Magic news. So we're recording this Tuesday night, actually, this week. A little bit different, but some sad news broke a little bit before we started recording the podcast. Former Orlando Magic player Brandon Hunter has sadly passed away at the age of 42. Brandon was the 56th pick in the 2003 NBA draft by the Boston Celtics, played one season with the Celtics, and then one season with the Magic in Dwight Howard's rookie year. Played 31 games off the bench for the Magic. So we just wanted to pass along our condolences and our prayers to Brandon's family. Obviously, anytime that we lose a member of the Magic family, it's a tragedy.
And I want to say, Jonathan, real quickly here, if I can, Dante Marcatelli put out an Instagram post, much more ties to Brandon Hunter than any of us had. He put a picture up not too long ago tonight and said, "This is so incredibly sad. We lost a part of our Magic family today. Truly enjoyed reconnecting with Brandon Hunter the last few years. Such a tremendous individual, cared deeply for his family and this community. Gone way too soon, BH. You will be missed." So beautiful tribute there from Dante, obviously rekindling and reconnecting here over the last few years, part of the community there, seemingly in Orlando, whatever it might have been. So yeah, like you said, obviously our condolences to Brandon Hunter and his family, but I did want to share that from someone that is closer to Brandon Hunter and always kind of has a deeper impact there.
We had some other news today from the Magic. So a new team reporter has been named, a new sideline reporter. Kendra Douglas has been named. She'll serve, reading from the Magic's press release here, she will serve as sideline reporter for select Bally Sports Florida telecasts, as well as a correspondent for the team's social media channels. So Kendra, a really decorated reporter here, a two-time Edward R. Murrow Award winner, covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers during their Super Bowl run in 2021, covered the Kansas City Chiefs during their Super Bowl run in 2020. She's a North Carolina alum, which I really appreciate that as a North Carolina fan. I wasn't smart enough to go there, obviously, but Kendra was. And she was part of the track team, competed in the 400-meter race at the ACC tournament, so an athlete as well. Kendra Douglas joining the Orlando Magic family here, and we're just really excited to see what she does and keep that trend, Kendra, of wherever you've gone, there's been a championship. So we want that trend to continue. So I just want to share a nice warm welcome to Kendra. And, she's been in Orlando. She's been working with WESH for the last few years. So she's familiar with the area, but now joining the Orlando Magic boys.
That'll be a lot of fun. For obviously you get someone new on board. I'm sure that we'll get to know Kendra there and just kind of her story, her background, and dive into that. So like you said, she attracts the winners there clearly, or the winners attract her. I don't know, but it was nice the Magic were able to snag her, and hopefully a championship will ensue.
I think it's important to clarify something here. We did get a couple questions about this. This is not a Dante Marcatelli replacement. Okay, so just super clear about this. Like, Dante is the host of Orlando Magic basketball. That means pregame, halftime, postgame, all that stuff. He's still doing that. That's not changing. Dante is here to stay. Kendra is the team reporter. And so that, like the press release mentions, sideline stuff, some of the more like social media, web content, that kind of stuff. So two very different things. Dante's going nowhere. He's still the host of Magic basketball, and we're going to keep it that way.
Completely agree. Could not agree with that more. But yeah, I did see a couple of those comments, Kevin, so appreciate you bringing that up. And like we alluded to a little bit ago, and you'll probably tell by the title of this episode, I'm assuming, this is the 35th anniversary season for the Orlando Magic, and we thought it would be fun. We thought it would be a good idea to go through and list the 35 greatest Magic players of all time. Now, anytime you're creating a list like this, not everyone is going to be happy, right? Like, we like to think this is a pretty definitive list. Like, we've done the work, we've debated amongst ourselves, we've gone through this. We feel like this is a pretty good list. Is it perfect? Probably not. Probably not. There's going to be people that disagree. A lot of, personal preference and bias, comes into making lists like this. But these are who we think are the 35 greatest Magic players of all time. And as we're going through and ranking these, remember, we're using the term greatest, not necessarily best, right? We had this debate, last year, with Dwight and Shaq. Who's the best? Who's the greatest? We're talking about greatest. We're talking in terms of legacy. Some of the criteria that we decided to, think about when making this list, obviously the individual player statistics, how many points, rebounds, assists, so on and so forth. Their personal and individual accolades. Did they make an all-star team? Did they make an all-NBA team? So on and so forth. their longevity. How long were they here, right? If a guy averaged, 17 points per game, but played it one season here, that's not the same as a guy averaging, maybe 9 or 8 points, but was here for 10 years. That longevity and loyalty to the franchise and just, being around for a long time, that really counts to us. That's something that we thought was really important. And obviously we're going to consider the team success. Were you really great on a bad team, or were you really great on a really good team? And then also considering like the fan and cultural impact. Were they a fan favorite? What did they mean for the Orlando Magic organization and culture as a whole? So just those are some of the things that we're thinking about as we start to go through this list, guys.
Can I just add one thing really quick about whether our list is perfect or not? The other thing to take into account is age. Like, let's be honest, the three of us, we are young, strapping. Okay, not as young anymore, but
Luke is young.
Luke is the only young one
strapping
here. Yeah, but so several of these guys that are on this list are guys that we never saw play with our own eyes. We just know about their legacy and their statistics, and we hear Magic fans that were there talk about this person. Obviously, we've watched as much film as possible on those teams, that exists on YouTube and stuff. So some of you older heads are going to hear some things maybe and be like, so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. But again, you got to think about our lens. And also, we also think about the fact of who listens to our show. Like, we have the metrics, we have, the demographics of who listens to our show. And so we know it tends to be people, about our age or younger who are probably in a similar boat with their Magic fanhood. So I thought that was important to mention because I know there are going to be some more seasoned Magic fans out there. They're going to have their opinion, and their opinion is completely valid. And I probably trust theirs more than ours. But this is our, kind of opinion, the list we put together. And so I thought that was important to mention.
I also want to add here real quick before we get started. It is fitting, obviously, that we're doing this list in honor of the 35th season. So in light of that, I did also want to share, Jason Beatty put out here recently, amongst other reporters, that in celebration of the 35 years of the Orlando Magic basketball, the Magic will unveil a new jersey and court for the upcoming season on Friday. So kind of tying everything together here, that 35th theme continues. I'm excited about that. I just wanted to slide that in here before we get started because I know there's people who maybe not be on Twitter, might not have seen it. So this Friday, you guys will be able to look out for that unveiling of the new jersey and the court.
And, we don't have it confirmed, but there's been a lot of rumors out there about, what the jersey is and everything like that. And we are getting super close to 4,000 subscribers here on YouTube. So in anticipation of that jersey being released and announced, we're going to be doing a giveaway probably, at the end of this week or maybe early next week. We'll start that sort of in like celebration of us hitting 4,000 YouTube subscribers. So just be on the lookout for that. If you're not already subscribed to us on YouTube, go ahead and make sure that you're already subscribed. So you'll be part of the way there in terms of being like entered in the giveaway. But thanks for bringing that up, Luke.
Yeah, and I'll also just say it's really cool. You get a chance to win a jersey of a Magic superstar, just a superstar jersey. That's all.
Future superstar. If you're
star,
Franz or
superstar,
Paolo or whoever that might be. But to your point, Kevin, like at least in my thinking, like I was trying to look at it from like not only my lens, like, hey, I may not have this guy ranked as high, but I know there are people who have followed this team now for 35 years that do, and we did take all of that into account. So we put a lot of work into this list, and we do feel like it is pretty close. It might not be perfect, but it is pretty close. So I'm going to start the honors here with the honorable mention. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to break it up into sections. So I'm going to start first with the honorable mention, and then I'm going to start with number 35, go through number 26. Luke is then going to take over. He'll take us from 25 to 16. And then Kevin is going to take us the rest of the way and take us from 15 all the way to 1. And then we'll discuss, hey, this guy might not be on the list, but who might be able to really jump up this list in the coming season. We'll have a little discussion of that at the end. So starting with the honorable mention, these are guys that sort of like just missed the list here. Number 1 is going to be Otis Smith. Younger Magic fans probably recognize that name as he was the general manager and sort of the architect that helped put together that '09 finals team. But really talking about just his impact as a player here, Otis Smith was part of the inaugural team, the first ever season of the Orlando Magic. He played 3 seasons with the Magic. He played in 195 games, averaged 11.4 points, 4.1 rebound, 1.9 assists, 1 steal, had 6.4 win shares in his time in Orlando. Next up, Donald Royal, who was part of the 95 finals team, started a lot of the season at shooting guard for the Magic before Dennis Scott really took over in the playoffs and into that run. Donald played 6 seasons with the Magic, appeared in 288 games, 28 playoff games, averaged 7.8 points, 3.4 rebounds, 1.3 assists, had 14.7 win shares, and he's 10th all time in Magic field goal percentage. Next up, this guy it was really hard to keep him off the list. Marcin Gortat, who was part of the '09 finals team, and during that run, you might not really be able to tell it from his raw statistical numbers, but was widely regarded as one of the best backup centers in the NBA at that time. He played 4 seasons, 175 games, 46 playoff games, averaged 3.7 points, 4.3 rebounds, 0.8 blocks, had 8.2 win shares. He's 3rd all-time in Magic rebound percentage, and he's 5th in win shares per 48 minutes, and 2nd all-time in defensive box plus minus. So I included some of those statistics to show that his raw counting stats didn't really encapsulate his entire impact in his time with the Magic. And then skip to my Lou Rafer Alston. Had he played more games for the Magic, I think we'll talk about this in a second, but had he played more games and been here longer, definitely would be higher on the list. But part of the '09 finals team, after Jameer Nelson goes down with the injury in the middle of the year, the acquisition of Rafer Alston literally saved that season, and his performance and impact on this team really catapulted that finals run. So in one season, he played 29 games, 23 playoff games, averaged 12 points, 2.9 rebounds, 5.1 assists, and 1.8 steals. He had 2.4 win shares. And then last but not least, on the honorable mention, our boy Elfrid Payton, 4 seasons, 281 games, 11.1 points, 4.2 rebounds, 6.4 assists, 1.4 steals, had 11.7 win shares, the all-time Magic leader in triple-doubles, and 7th all-time in assists. And his injury in, I believe, January was that the 2016 season, basically like single-handedly had Scott Skiles wanting to quit in the middle of the season. So I wanted to throw that in there. I may have the season wrong, but honorable mention, guys. Anybody from this list that sticks out to you, or maybe someone else that you would have included as an honorable mention?
I think in looking at this list as a whole, and obviously, can bring it up here as well. Marcin Gortat, for instance, playing, 4 seasons with the Magic, and really, like, when looking at how many seasons these guys spent on our roster, if you look at it, these guys that played on the finals teams and things like that, it felt like they played longer. Rafer Alston, a great example as well, only 1 season, but it felt like he was here for longer because he had a big impact on the team and our memory of the team. Whereas, like, in the bad years of the Magic, for instance, these guys that might have played more seasons than Rafer Alston, you're like, wow, they really here were that long? So I think going down this list, and that's something that I kept in, like, that just kept coming to me when I was going down our list and everything that was built, was that I cannot believe some of these guys spent as short of amount of time, and I can't believe some of these guys spent as long of amount of time on this roster.
I think part of that is, Luke, some of these guys that were on the good teams, they basically played half a season in the playoffs each year, For example, like you talk about Rafer Alston, he only played 29 regular season games, but he played 23 playoff games because he went all the way to the finals. Marcin Gortat's the same way, 175 regular season games, but he played 46 playoff games. It's like another half season, So all this stuff kind of adds up, especially the guys that were on good teams. It feels like, especially that whole era, like that 2008, 2010, 11-ish era. We have some guys in that era on this list. And so, again, those guys, a lot of deep playoff runs. And so it also helps that those are the games you remember more than any of them, the playoff games. And so it feels
Mhm.
like, they kind of were around for a while. But I definitely agree, especially Ray for Austin. It's like, oh yeah, it's just a part of Magic history. And it's like, well, he played 29 regular season games. So that's
Right.
kind of how you end up on an honorable mention list like this. But yeah, I'm totally cool with it so far.
Going through this and sort of going back to the point, with Kevin about sort of our lens, like if you had asked me 24 hours ago, like would Courtney Lee be on the 35 greatest Magic players of all time? I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. But when you really break it down, it's like, well, no, absolutely not. But just like the impact that he had on 14-year-old Jonathan, it's like, yeah, Courtney Lee's got to be one of the 35 greatest Magic players of all time. It's like, no, it's not really particularly close, but it's just a funny, point to your bit about the lens. So, all right, let's start with the list. Again, I'm going to go through 35 through 26 here. Starting with number 35. This might be cheating, but I just feel like this dude has to be on the list. Some people aren't going to like this, but this guy just had to make the list. Number 35, Paolo Banchero. 2023 NBA Rookie of the Year. He was the number 1 overall pick in the 2022-2023 NBA draft. Just one season. Has played 72 games, averaged 20 points, 6.9 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 2.4 win shares. Already third all-time Magic points per game. Now, if you look on Basketball Reference, I think they want to see like at least 2 seasons from a guy before they put him on any of those all-time ranking lists. But as you look through the list, he would be third currently. If he's able to match his scoring total from this year, he will be third. And I have him here as the future greatest Magic player of all time. At least that's what I hope. So Paolo Banchero, number 35. Next, 34, Aaron Aflalo. Played 3 seasons with the Magic. He played from 12 to 2014 and then came back in 2017 for the end of his career. 190 games, 13.5 points, 3 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 7.4 win shares. And in 2012 and 2013, Aaron Aflalo was like arguably legitimately the best player on the Magic.
Yeah.
That's, if you've been through it with Aaron Aflalo, you have really been through it. Number 33, Wendell Carter Jr., 3 seasons, 141 games, 14.6 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists, has 10.8 win shares. Number 32, Markelle Fultz, 4 seasons, 158 games. He's also appeared in 5 playoff games, 12.7 points, 3.5 rebounds, 5 assists, 1.3 steals, 6.7 win shares. Franz Wagner played 2 seasons, 159 games, 16.9 points, 4.1 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 9.4 win shares. Number 30, Terry Catledge, part of the inaugural team in 89-90, played 4 seasons, 224 games, 15.3 points, 6.8 rebounds, 1.1 assists, had 8.8 win shares, 7th all-time in Magic offensive rebounds. Number 29, Jeff Turner, and we have an asterisk here next to Jeff Turner's name because we had a discussion amongst ourselves of should Jeff Turner's impact as a broadcaster sort of change where he is on this list. And we came to the conclusion that is going to be sort of a separate thing. We're really just talking about his impact on the floor as a player. If we were to sort of consider his broadcasting career for the Magic, he would be ranked much higher than 29th. But Jeff Turner, part of the 95 finals team, played 7 seasons, 411 games, 18 playoff games, averaged 6 points, 3.3 rebounds, 1 assist, had 6.3 win shares. 28, Pat Garrity, 9 seasons, 513 games, 17 playoff games, averaged 7.4 points, 2.7 rebounds, had 17.6 win shares. 5th all-time in Magic games played, 9th in three-pointers made. Number 27, DJ Augustine, played 4 seasons, 291 games, 10 playoff games, 10.1 points, 2.1 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 15.1 win shares, and the game winner in 2019 in Game 1 in the first round against the Toronto Raptors. That absolutely came into our thinking here. And then 26, Steve Francis, played 2 seasons, 124 games, averaged 19.4 points, 5.4 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 1.3 steals, 9.1 win shares in total. And right now, he is technically ranked 3rd all-time in Magic points per game.
But yeah, I think some interesting people here in this section. I think it's funny, Luke, you talked about people that you feel like were on the team longer or shorter or whatever. I feel like that was DJ Augustine. To me, it's like, yeah, he played what, like 2 seasons? And then you look at, oh, 4 seasons, 291 games. Like, my brain just, that's kind of crazy. Pat, here's the thing. I love longevity. All right. Longevity means a lot to Kevin. So, like, I look at a guy like Pat Garrity, 9 seasons. That means a lot. You know, as a Magic fan, we don't always have guys that, you know, love to stick around the franchise for very long. And so guys like Pat Garrity with 9, Jeff Turner with 7, that kind of stuff means a lot to me. This is interesting. This is the section, though, where we got all the current young guns, you know, the Paolo, the Franz, the Markel, the Wendell. Very interesting, you know, to see them already potentially in our 35. I'm curious, those of you listening, would you include some of these, you know, current guys in this top 35? Definitely let us know in the comments or on Twitter or whatever. Or sorry, X. Let us know on X. But yeah, it's a pretty interesting start to the list, and definitely some interesting guys to come. Luke?
Yeah, I was just going to add the one from this list that Magic fans could, you know, I guarantee you that there are young Magic fans listening to this, maybe even our age listening to this, that are like, who the heck is Terry Catledge? And in looking at people who know Terry Catledge or have heard of him and familiar, known as the Catman, but in looking at that, it is so funny to see that he averages as many points as he did at that, you know, 15.3 points per game, because in the inaugural season on the inaugural team, he averaged 19 points. The team was atrocious, but he still was like 48% from the field if you look at the stats. But it is so funny, as the team gets better, Catledge kind of takes a back seat the longer the seasons go on. So this is not to slight Terry Catledge, but it's maybe not the end of the world. You don't know who Terry Catledge is, but he was at the beginning of this team, puts up 19 points per game his first season, and then that guy named Shaquille O'Neal comes along. Terry Catledge all of a sudden becomes one of the least, you know, minutes played on the team after being, you know, one of the leading guys on this team in the, you know, years prior. So that was my takeaway, maybe an educational piece there for those that aren't aware of who Terry Catledge is.
Terry Catledge is like the 90s version of Aaron Aflalo. Like, Aaron Aflalo everywhere else was not that good, but like Aaron Aflalo, if I remember correctly, had like an 18 point per game season for the Magic, where he was the featured guy offensively. End of games, we were begging for that patented Aaron Aflalo baseline turnaround. His points per game came down a bit, you know, when he comes back in 2017, but especially those, you know, 2 seasons, the first 2 seasons that he spent in Orlando, was like the featured guy, you know, offensively, and helped him get another contract with the Denver Nuggets. But yeah, some of these guys are the epitome of like good stats, bad team guys. But yeah, the Catman, Terry Catledge, had to include him.
Well, now let's move on this list to 25 through 16. We'll start at 25. Victor Oladipo, 3 seasons with the Magic, 224 games, almost 16 points a game, 15.9, 4.4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.6 steals, and 9.7 win shares. 24, it is actually Michael Petrus, part of the 09 finals team, 3 seasons, 148 games, 38 playoff games, which is crazy, 8.7 points, 3 rebounds, 7.4 win shares. 23, Tobias Harris, 4 seasons, 205 games, 15.6 points, 7 rebounds, 1.8 assists, 14.1 win shares. 22, Mike Miller, 2001 Rookie of the Year, obviously. 3 seasons, 194 games, 8 playoff games, 14 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 12.8 win shares. 21, Ryan Anderson, the 2011-2012 Most Improved Player, 3 seasons, 188 games, 20 playoff games, 11.5 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, 18.4 win shares, second all-time Magic win shares per 48. Number 20, the most recent guest of the Six-Man Show, Human Torch, Terrence Ross, should have been, as noted here on this list, should have been the 18-19 Six-Man of the Year. 7 seasons, 349 games, 10 playoff games, 12.7 points, 3 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 10 win shares, and 6th Magic all-time 3-point field goals made. 19, Scott Skiles, Part of the inaugural team, 5 seasons, 384 games, 2 playoff games, 12.9 points, 2.9 rebounds, 7.2 assists, 24.6 win shares. First all-time Magic assists per game. Second total assist, 7th in free throws. NBA all-time records for assists in one game. As we all know, 30 in that game where he holds the record for assists. 18, Bo Outlaw, Magic ambassador. You guys see him around Amway all the time, I'm sure, as we all have. Part of the 99-2000 Heart and Hustle team. 8 seasons, 360 games, 8 playoff games, 6.3 points, 6 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1.5 blocks, 1.1 steals, 26.3 win shares, 8th all-time in Magic rebounds, 4th in blocks, and 1st in field goal percentage. 17, Aaron Gordon, 7 seasons with the Magic, 428 games, 5 playoff games, 12.9 points, 6.4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 22.3 win shares, 10th all-time Magic games played, 6 in rebounds, 9th in blocks, 2 dunk contests robbed. Number 16, Vince Carter, part of the 09-10 Eastern Conference Finals teams where the Magic were 59-23 in that regular season, their best Magic regular season record at that. 2 seasons with the Magic, 90. He's another one, by the way. You know, I think we all know that the stint wasn't long, but it still felt longer than 2 seasons, even though we know that's the case. 97 games, 14 playoff games, 16.3 points per game, 3.9 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 7.4 win shares. So that is there for Vince Carter to round out there from 25 to 16, boys.
So I think for me, looking at this list, you know, Vince Carter, another thing that puts him on this list is just being a local guy, you know, from Daytona and all that good stuff. That's important. I love a couple of the fun stats that we're throwing in this list, like the 2 dunk contest robbed for Aaron Gordon. That's an important stat. Terrence Ross should have been 6th man of the year in 18-19. That kind of stuff is fun. But yeah, it's interesting looking at lists like this. Like if you were to ask me, like before we reflect on this kind of stuff, like I would say like the Magic compared to a lot of other teams don't have that kind of rich of a history or whatever, some kind of crazy list of top 35 players. When you look at this list, it's like, you know what? We got a nice group of guys that have played in blue and white, you know? Like it's good dudes, you know? And so it's cool to look at a list like this. A couple of the people that stand out that we just mentioned, Ryan Anderson, I thought it was kind of cool on Friday's thing with the jersey unveiling and the court unveiling. Ryan Anderson's going to be there. That was in the press conference. We haven't seen or heard a lot of, you know, Ryan Anderson being around the team over these last several years. He's been at Amway and stuff like that. But as far as like official Magic, you know, press releases or all that kind of stuff, we haven't seen him a part of that. So it's kind of cool that he'll be in town on Friday. Obviously, you mentioned Terrence Ross. The longevity plays into it. 7 seasons, 349 games. Scott Skiles, the guy who still holds an NBA record, 30 assists, guys. Like, that's still insane. And that happened in a Magic uniform. Like, that's pretty cool. Bo Outlaw, great guy. Aaron Gordon, you know, dunk contests are memorable and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, Vince Carter being a local guy and taking the team to the Eastern Conference Finals and the best record in the team history. So definitely a cool list and definitely excited for the next 15. But Jonathan, what do you think about this section?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like today in prepping for this, I went back and it had been probably a few years since I had watched the highlights from Scott Skiles' 30 assist game. And he makes some absolutely ridiculous passes in that game and was just like finding open teammate after open teammate. Obviously, you don't set a record like that without guys knocking down shots, but it was like guys just finding like the perfect lane to cut and get to the rim every single time. But that might have been one of the absolute worst defensive performances from the Denver Nuggets in the history of the NBA. Guys had no business getting as open as they did, seemingly on every single possession. So as impressive as it is that Scott Skiles recorded 30 assists in this game, it is equally as impressive as bad as that Denver defense was. When you go back and watch that, you're like, what are you guys doing? Like at some point, you've got to... You cannot take your eyes off of these guys because they're just cutting and getting to the rim over and over and over again. Aaron Gordon, you know, the 2 dunk contests, like some people will laugh about that because like he didn't really win. When we look back, especially on that 2016 dunk contest in Toronto, him and Zach LaVine, it's widely regarded as like one of the absolute best dunk contests in the history of the NBA. And Aaron Gordon's performance in that arguably is the greatest dunk contest performance in the history of the NBA Slam Dunk Contest. So I don't feel like that's insignificant. I know that we joke about it, and I'll never forgive Dwayne Wade for it, but like 50 years from now, people are going to look back on the history of the NBA, and clips from that dunk contest will be included the same way we see highlights from Dominique Wilkins and Michael Jordan and Vince Carter and Dwight Howard and Nate Robinson. Aaron Gordon is going to be a part of those reels moving forward. And like in the Magic's somewhat good, but also partly tortured history, when you think about like the greatest moments in Magic history, that has to be in the conversation. So to me, that was a big part of, maybe not a big part of, but it was a part of Aaron Gordon being ranked as high as he was, especially, you know, the longevity and everything like that.
I will say one more thing about this before we move on. Scott Skiles, the fact that he only averaged like 7 assists per game, which let's not get it twisted, I would kill for a Magic player to average 7 assists in a game at this point. But Scott Skiles averaging 7 assists in a game, you look up his highest assist games, by the way, in that Denver game, he also had 22 points, which is super impressive. You'd think kind of probably goes to the fact that Denver's defense was terrible, but Scott Skiles was that good for this team. But if you go through like his assists, he had 3 other games that were in the 20s as far as assists go. 21 assists, 20 assists, 20 assists, 19, 18, 18, 17, 17, 17. Like there are so many high assist games for him to only have 7 assists per game. Where it really dropped off for him, and it, you know, where he goes down, when I say dropped off, he goes from, you know, whatever, 8, 9 assists per game in a season down to like 6 is when Penny comes on the scene, right? Like that's when it drops off, and that's probably why he eventually gets down to 7 a game. I just thought that was super interesting how high his output was for assists and how many games he has at like in the 20s and 30s and the teens in general that we just don't see anymore, especially from Magic players. And so just shout out Scott Skiles. That guy was wild.
Last thing that I'll say about Scott Skiles is the sour taste that I still have in my mouth from his coaching tenure probably affected the way that I would rank him on this list. Like if it weren't for that, he may be, you know, a spot or 2 higher, but I am still kind of you know, bitter about his departure. Okay, let's take a quick break to give our patrons a very special shout out. If you haven't heard by now, we do have a Patreon community where you can help support the show and help support the content that we make on a weekly and sometimes what feels like daily basis. But you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show, where for as little as $2 a month, you can help support the show. Part of our benefits is we give a special shout out to our Hall of Fame and Elite tier patrons on every single episode. So we'll go ahead and start with the Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Franz's Warmth, Pierre A. Nostalgia and M&M's, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Eduardo Sanchez, Drum, Drummy, Drum, Danimal, Dodo15, Bobby Skinner, PV in the Mix, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Eric Lopez, Fuchsia Wangerado, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Destined for Greatness, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Ty, Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95, Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Rican, Shahin 177, Bobby the Don, Himlo Band, Himro, RM Prop 221, Rapistrana, Magic Kid 714, Spanking Season, Soft Taco, Fuego Nando, Victor Colon, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz Maria, Keith Wallace, Fritz, Currency Kevin, Bruv Sal. A big thank you to all of our patrons. Again, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show.
Always a big shout out to our patrons. They're the best. They're awesome. They're what make, you know, like our giveaway that's coming up this weekend. They make it possible. So yeah, thank you to our patrons. I have the privilege and honor and duty, obligation, you know, responsibility to unveil the last 15, the top 15, the greatest Magic players of all time. And it's a doozy, but it's also really cool. Like from here on out, the player with the fewest seasons played is like 4 seasons played. Like this next group, yeah, they're going to have the stats. Yeah, they're going to have all that kind of stuff. But these are like some very loyal. I don't know if loyal is the right word for everybody. For the most part, these are some very loyal Magic players. And so that means a lot to me. And so I'm interested to hear what you guys think and what our listeners think. So here we go. Number 15, we have Jonathan Clay, JJ Redick. Part of the 2009 finals team, played 7 seasons. It's hard to remember that because the first several seasons that he was in Orlando, he didn't really play that much. But in all, 7 seasons, 396 games, 44 playoff games, just over 9 points, 1.8 rebounds, just under 2 assists, 23.9 win shares, 10th all-time in Magic 3-point field goals, Jonathan Clay Reddick. Number 14, maybe a little controversial, Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier, 7 seasons, 435 games. But here's the thing, like if you just look on paper, you can't argue it. 7 seasons, 435 games, 10 playoff games, 16.2 points, just under 3 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal per game, 23.3 win shares, 9th all time in Magic games played, 3rd in 3-point field goal percentage, 9th in free throws, 10th in assists, 8th in points. I mean, that's a guy that's deserving of being in the top 15, if you ask me. Whether you like him or not, that's up to you. Number 13, again, a guy who was here for a while, maybe should have played more games. Grant Hill was an all-star in 2001. Voted, didn't play because he was injured. In 2005, but he played 6 seasons, 200 games, 4 playoff games, 16.4 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 1.1 steals, and 17.5 win shares. Good old Grant Hill. Number 12, we have Dennis Scott, 3D, part of the 1995 NBA Finals team. 7 seasons, 446 games, 41 playoff games. Just under 15 points, 3 boards, 2 assists, a steal, 28.3 win shares, 8th all-time in Magic games played. Still 1st in 3-point field goal percentage, 8th in steals, 10th in points, and of course, in the Orlando Magic Hall of Fame. Next up, Sweet Lou, Rashard Lewis. All-star in 2009, part of the 2009 Finals team. He played 4 seasons, 257 games, 48 playoff games, 16.3 points, just over 5 boards, 2 assists, a steal, 27.4 win shares, 7th all-time in Magic 3-point field goal percentage, which is kind of surprising. I thought it might be more. And then 9th in win shares per 48 minutes. Number 10, the Goggles, Horace Grant, part of the 95 Finals team, 7 seasons, 411 games, 38 playoff games, 11.3 points, 8.2 boards, 2 assists, a steal, a block, 42.2 win shares, 7th all-time in Magic minutes played, 5th in rebounds, 9th in steals, 5th in blocks, 8th in win shares. Just a stat stuffer, Horace Grant. Next up, we got Hedo Turkoglu, of course, part of the 2009 Finals team. 8 seasons, 497 games, 49 playoff games, 14.5 points, 4.5 boards, 3.9 assists, 39.6 win shares, 7th all-time in Magic games played, 5th in 3-point field goal, 5th in 3-point field goals, 6th in free throws, 7th in rebounds, 6th in assists, 10th in steals, 7th in points, 10th in win shares. Hedo Turkoglu, which I think he's going to be there on Friday as well. Wasn't he in the list for the jersey thing? I think he was. Can't remember. It was Ryan Anderson, Rashard Lewis. That he was on there as well, which was another surprising one. But anyway, number 8, Darrell Armstrong, part of the 95 Finals team. He was the most improved player in 1999 and the 6th man of the year in 1999, which is also never happened. Part of the Heart and Hustle team, 9 seasons, 502 games, 24 playoff games, 40.2 win shares, 6 all-time Magic games played, 8th in 3-point field goals, 8th in free throws, 3rd in assists, 2nd in steals, 9th in win shares. That is a guy I think most Magic fans would love to see him back with this organization. Like he's been with the Dallas Mavericks for a bajillion years. Thought maybe he would leave with their coaching change. I guess it was last offseason. Obviously, he stayed and is still there. He loves Dallas and loves that organization. But I think most Magic fans would love to see him, on the coaching staff here in Orlando. Last 2 before we get to our top 5. Got Jameer Nelson, All-Star 2009, part of the 2009 Finals team. 10 seasons for Jameer, 651 games, 44 playoff games, 12.6 points, 3.1 rebounds, 5.4 assists, a steal per game, 43 win shares, 2nd all-time in Magic games played, 4th in 3-point field goals, 10th in free throws, 1st in assists, 5th in steals, 5th in points, 7th in win shares, man. Jameer, one of my favorites of all time. Love to see him here. And number 6, you obviously know who the 5 are, and most people know who the 6 is as well. It's Nick Anderson. I mean, Mr. Orlando Magic, first ever Magic draft pick, part of the inaugural team, part of the 95 Finals team, played 10 seasons just like Jameer, 692 games, 44 playoff games, 15.4 points, just over 5 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 1.5 steals, 52.9 win shares, all-time Magic leader in games played, 4th in free throws, 4th in rebounds, 5th in assists, 1st in steals, 7th in blocks, 2nd in points, 2nd in win shares. Again, Mr. Orlando Magic, you know where he's going to be on this list. a pretty, just thinking about just walking down memory lane through this 15 through 6. I will mention really fast, I misspoke earlier talking about Rashard Lewis. He's 7th all time in 3-point field goals made. I know some people are going to scream at me if I said field goal percentage. That was my mistake. 3-point field goals made. But guys, what do you think? Luke, we'll start with you. What do you think about this run of like 15 through number 6?
Darrell Armstrong is the one that sticks out to me. I think people obviously know who Darrell Armstrong is. You don't I was born in 96. Darrell Armstrong was done playing for the Magic by the time I was 6 years old. But what I do remember is this is where video games come in clutch for me. NBA, I still was playing like in like the early 2000s at the ages of 5 and 6. I still remember playing like NBA Live with KG on the cover, and Darrell Armstrong in that white Magic jersey. I just have vivid memories of, for whatever reason, using strictly Darrell Armstrong and loving playing with him. Just like an iconic part of this organization and of that time period with the Magic. So it was super fun to hear, obviously, see his name again. You talk about the Magic, you have to bring up Darrell Armstrong. Unfortunately, not everybody does, but it is fun when he does get brought up to think about the fond memories that you've got, whether it's too young, but you played video games with him, using him, or actually watching him on the court. Obviously, to this point, I've seen highlights, things like that, full game, whatever. But Darrell Armstrong, for me, is the takeaway, the one that like really struck a memory for me, and a fond one at that. So shout out Darrell Armstrong.
Yeah, Darrell Armstrong is someone that at times is forgotten in the conversation, especially amongst our generation and younger. But the people that witnessed Darrell Armstrong, like joining the team, like right before, that finals run and playing for the better part of a decade, like the people that witnessed Darrell Armstrong, like he is one of their all-time favorite, not just Magic players, but NBA players of all time. And they are willing to ride and die for Darrell Armstrong. Like for the better part of 9 seasons was like the heartbeat of this team, like through the, Shaq and Penny era, and then just kind of like ushered in, like the Tracy McGrady era, sort of towards the end there. So, yeah, Darrell Armstrong, obviously. And then, Nick Anderson is a guy that, we've talked about a lot. And what so many people think of when they think of Nick Anderson are the free throws, in the 95 finals. And when you go through the stats here and the numbers and just the amount of time that he was here, like he is so much more than that. And the fact that, that is what is remembered, you say the name Nick Anderson and people go right to the free throws. Like that is legitimately a tragedy, because he was so much more than that as a player and has meant so much more than that to the Magic organization. And the last thing that I'll say is about my boy Evan Fournier. I know how a lot of people feel about Evan Fournier. I listed him last year on like an Instagram post that we did as one of my top 10 favorite Magic players of all time. Whether or not he's your favorite, when you look at the statistics and where he stacks up all time in Magic rankings, it's not arguable that he is one of the, if you don't have him as high as 14, that's fine. But like somewhere in the top 20 Magic players of all time. For the haters out there, it's the truth, and deal with it.
It's hard to argue. It really is. Again, people are going to talk about attitude or whatever, but I mean, the guy was, the stats don't lie. So the only thing I'll just add, not just what you guys mentioned, but Horace Grant is another guy. If we're talking about people from the past and the history and everything, Horace Grant, just thinking about his history, like obviously with the Magic had a great stretch, but like the dude was just a winner. Like he came to Orlando, obviously from Chicago, and he went to the finals, a bunch of times, won the 3 championships with the Bulls, and then won the 4th one with the Lakers, like in, what was it, 2001. And in between that, he played for the Magic and, of course, went to the finals with that team, played for the Sonics. The guy just won a bunch of games. Like, what a career Horace Grant had. And so that's pretty cool. But yeah, that group of guys is pretty special. But none more special than the top 5. These are the guys, and no, nothing's going to be a surprise here. That's the thing. That's kind of interesting with, the Orlando Magic. Like, a lot of other teams, there's a lot of debate, like who's the top 5, who's the Mount Rushmore and stuff. For most Magic fans, there is no debate. This is the 5. Now, you can put them maybe in different order or whatever, but this is the 5, and so we're going to talk about them. Number 5, Nikola Vucevic. Obviously, the more recent of all of these dudes. All-star in 2019, 2021, of course, 9 seasons. 591 games, 10 playoff games, 17.6 points, 10.8 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 50.1 win shares, fourth all time in Magic games played, first in field goals, second in rebounds, eighth in assists, sixth in steals, third in blocks, third in points, third in win shares, Nikola Vucevic. Guys, I feel like just with these like five, I don't know, I feel like each one kind of might deserve a little bit of its own time. Maybe we can argue about 1 through 5 later. But for here, like Nikola Vucevic, what does Nikola Vucevic mean to you? What does he mean to the Magic, and why? Why is he number 5? Jonathan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, just he came in at a time where there was so much uncertainty, in the Magic organization and the Magic team, and trading Dwight, and he was, really just thought of as like a sort of like a throw-in, in that deal. He wasn't really like the centerpiece. Like, oh my gosh, the Magic are getting back Nikola Vucevic. Had one season in Philadelphia, was pretty decent, but was largely an unknown. And even for his first few seasons here in Orlando, like he was solid, like double guy, somebody you could count on, 13, 14 points, 10 rebounds. But is it a guy that we ever thought would like blossom into an all-star and one of the better players in the league? In the first couple of years, you would have probably said no. And pair that with just the struggles that the team, went through. We talked about this with Nikola Vucevic. I don't mean to plug our episode with Nikola Vucevic, but this is as good of a time as any. We talked about it with him. Our most recent episode with Terrence Ross, we talked about it with him. That 18-19 team that really didn't have a lot of expectations, and into January was not having a great season. They go on this almost miraculous run and make the playoffs. You beat the eventual champs in game 1. And we got to see Vooch blossom into an all-star in 2019 and 2021. And when a guy spends as much time as Nikola Vucevic did here, 9 seasons, 591 games, and is, top 10 and top 5 in all of these statistics, like just when you look at the character development, I guess I would say, of Nikola Vucevic from the time that he was traded here to just all the struggles and had a little bit of team success at the end, and then just where he ended up in terms of all-time Magic rankings. Like, to me, it's not really a conversation. Like, he is absolutely the 5th greatest Magic player of all time.
Yeah, there's not a doubt about it. This is something we have been saying since his time in Orlando ended, and it shouldn't be a surprise anymore. People had some time to warm up to it, think about it, whatever. Vooch has been incredible as a person during his time in Orlando, which plays a huge part in the fan aspect of the rankings as well. But the funny thing is, you don't even need the fan aspect and the favoritism or whatever with that. Like, you literally can just base it on statistics. The team had been so bad for as many years as the Magic were, and so for him to finally, turn into the player that he was, that you talk about and you harp on, Jonathan, it was unexpected. It was welcomed, and you heard Terrence talk about it on the last episode with us. He talks about, how much fun it was in that season, the 18-19 season, playing alongside an all-star, when obviously with Vucevic, how much it energizes a team to be able to say, like, I play with an all-star on this team. And Vooch brought life to this team, and something that Magic hadn't had in so long. So, breath of fresh air, Vucevic, well-deserved, number 5.
Yeah, for me, when it comes to Vooch, I think, Jonathan, you hit it on the head. Part of the love that we have for Vooch and the connection that we have for Vooch is we saw the progression. Like all these other guys, the other 4 guys in this list, they were highly touted prospects. Both of them, all 4 of them were top 4 not T-Mac, but they were all really, really high draft picks and stuff, And so there's a level of expectation with those guys. With Vooch, it was like you said, the Dwight trade, but to see him grow as a player, as a human being, it just makes that attachment that much stronger, And so I think that's part of it. The other thing for me was how many times, like once Vooch got good, get good, kid. Once he got good, how many times could he have just jumped ship because the team was bad, But he was so loyal to this fan base. Maybe the most loyal player in the history of the Magic, like if you ask me, because he was good enough to go play somewhere else, good enough to try to compete, good enough to make more money, good enough to do all those things. But he loved and still loves the city beautiful. And so that means a lot to me. And so absolutely number 5 for sure.
Last thing I want to add is like the way that he left and like the reaction to him leaving. Like I will never in my life forget
Absolutely
that first press conference with the Chicago Bulls. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it now and getting emotional. And like you had all these guys, everybody was here, everybody left, you know, all these other guys that we're about to talk about here. And like this guy wanted to stay. And to your point, talking about his loyalty, like he did that because he wanted to build something in Orlando and wanted to be a piece of that. So like so all that together, you know, Vooch number 5.
Yeah. However many hundreds, maybe we're up to thousands, I don't know, probably hundreds, Magic players we've had. There's only been one that's cried for a departure. And that means something. That means a lot, you know? So we love Vooch. But here we are at number 4. Penny Hardaway. What a special, special talent he was. 6 seasons, 369 games, 45 playoff games, 46.3 win shares. And during that time, he was 4th all-time in Magic free throws, 9th in offensive rebounds, 4th in assists, 3rd in steals, 6th in win shares. Also 4-time All-Star, 95 through 98, 3-time All-NBA. That's 2 first team, 1 third team, and part of the 1995 NBA Finals team. Penny Hardaway, again, one of the most talented, and some might even argue, and parts of his career, like in a vacuum, maybe the most talented Magic player of all time, arguably. But Jonathan, what do we think about old Penny Hardaway?
Yeah, just tons of stuff to go off of. You know, 4th all-time Magic free throws, 9th in offensive rebounds, which was pretty impressive. 4th in assists, 3rd in steals, 6th in win shares in the Magic Hall of Fame. Like you said, one of the most talented players to ever put on the pinstripes, and in a vacuum, like one of the most talented what ifs of all time. Like Penny Hardaway's body failing him was really tragic. This is a guy who came in first season, you know, all rookie, doesn't win, you know, rookie of the year, but, you know, pretty close. But then right after that, second season, all NBA first team. Like when does that happen? A guy's second season and he's already being, you know, given the title of basically the best point guard in the league. The very next season, all NBA first team again. So, you know, 2 out of his first 3 seasons was put in there with, you know, some of the 5 best players in the NBA. And then the third season, all NBA third team. Shaq leaves, has to take too much responsibility. Body just falls apart. Is never really the same player. And it's just crazy. A guard at his size, as talented as he was, and we just never really got to see everything come to fruition because of Shaq's departure.
Yeah, it's there's a whole lot of, like you said, what ifs with Penny, but the snapshot that we did get with him, very special, one of a kind. I mean, seriously, one of a kind player. Like, you can talk about stats, you can talk about all that stuff. Watch Penny Hardaway play. Seriously, if you are a younger person, have never seen Anthony Hardaway play basketball, literally go look on YouTube. You've seen these other guys. You may not have seen Anthony Hardaway. One of a kind player, really special, and obviously deserving to be in our top 5.
Last thing here, when you look back on it, like Penny comes in, has this massive impact, and like all of a sudden the Magic have like 2 top 10 NBA players, like right off the rip. And not to compare these guys, when we look at Paolo, we look at Franz and some of like their potential, like they have the opportunity to be like the best 1-2 punch that the Magic have had since Penny and Shaq. The potential may not be quite that high, but just the fact that it's even like in the realm of possibility is really exciting.
Absolutely. And we talk about potential. I agree. Maybe not as high. However, the future is unwritten for these guys. And so what Shaq and Penny couldn't do, win a title, is still very much fair game for Franz and Paolo. And that's obviously very exciting. Number 3, Jonathan's boy, old T-Mac, Tracy McGrady. 4 seasons, 295 games, 15 playoff games, 28.1 points per game, 7 boards, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, a block, 48.2 win shares, second all-time in Magic free throws, 9th in rebounds, 9th in assists, 7th in steals, 8th in blocks, 4th in points, 5th in win shares, and during his time in Orlando was a 4-time All-Star, 4-time All-NBA, 4th in MVP voting in 2002, 2003, and 2-time scoring champ in the entire NBA in 2003, 2004. Tracy McGrady, obviously, first thing you think of is a scorer. But homeboy filled the box score. Like reading those off again, not just the 28 points, 7 boards, 5 assists, 1.5 steals, 1 block. The guy did everything. He was a very, very special player and obviously someone deserving to be in the top 5. And also got to mention before I hand it off to you guys, Central Florida guy, Polk County, stand up. Old T-Mac there at number 3, Luke.
People often, like, I've seen, photos with Vince Carter, T-Mac, and Raptors jerseys. People forget that it started, like, Tracy McGrady really started in Orlando. First season in Orlando, making his all-star appearance, a 4-time all-star in Orlando. Only, in Houston, even after that, he was but he had 3 all-star appearances there in Houston. So, I mean, he just really gets his start. 2-time NBA scoring champ, both those times in Orlando. Nowhere else did that take place. And you just think, like, what could have been with T-Mac in Orlando in the long haul. And that's what hurts the most. Obviously, he's very highly productive in Houston for the next 3 years and 4 years, really, going down to like as low as 21.6 points per game, which would have been nice. But yeah, it's all those things with Tracy. I think people do forget as far as like where he got his start. Really local guy, like you said. Just Tracy McGrady, well deserved of this spot here at number 3.
Was also the 2000-2001 most improved player. Don't want to forget that. But people, it's almost like revisionist history now when people talk about Tracy McGrady and like the conversation that like, no, like in the early 2000s, there were legitimate like barbershop style arguments of who is better, Tracy McGrady or Kobe Bryant. And in 2003, Tracy McGrady finished 4th in MVP voting. Kobe Bryant finished 5th. Like these guys, it was legitimately like, who is the best player in the NBA? Is it Tracy McGrady? Is it Kobe Bryant? Obviously, Tim Duncan, Shaq, those guys were still very much in their prime. When we talk about guys on the wing, and the reason that people watch basketball is like, the highlight reels, the dunks, the shot making, like those were the 2 very best guys at the time in the league. And like people honestly sort of forget that now. Like Tracy McGrady was absolutely 100% of that guy. And he was the reason that I fell in love with basketball. And yeah, what I would do for a Tracy McGrady on this roster now.
Yeah, talk about a perfect fit, dude. Slot him in at the 2, surrounded with the rest of the dudes. Holy smokes, man. That'd be sick. All right, we know who's left. It's a question of who's number 2, who's number 1. For some people, for us, it's not. It's not a debate. We'll get to that. But number 2, Big Diesel, Shaquille O'Neal, Shaq, 4 seasons, 295 games, 36 playoff games, 27.2 points, 12.5 boards, 2.4 assists, 2.8 blocks, 48.3 win shares. 3rd all-time Magic free throws, 3rd in rebounds, 2nd in blocks, 6th in points, 4th in win shares, and during his time in Orlando was a 4-time All-Star, 1-time NBA scoring champ, 3-time All-NBA, 4 years in top 10 MVP voting, and part, of course, of the 1995 NBA Finals team. Shaquille O'Neal, very important on the court, very important off the court. I guess we can get into that as well. But I don't know. Jonathan, you want to kick us off with old Shaq?
Yeah, just, we had a conversation, last year, like early in the offseason last year, talking about, who was the greatest Magic player of all time. There's one guy on this list that's not there yet. We're going to talk about him, obviously. If this conversation were who was the best players in Magic history, Shaquille O'Neal would be at the top of the list. Like the most dominant on the floor, just overall most impactful. What it comes down to is obviously everybody still has, bad feelings about the way that he left. And he just did not have the longevity that a lot of other guys had here. But when you talk about the cultural impact, like this logo behind me, when we talk about the pinstripes and just how iconic like those 90s pinstripes are, very much in part due to Shaquille O'Neal and just sort of like the swagger and like the coolness that he brought to this team. Shaquille O'Neal never plays for the Orlando Magic. Those pinstripes might not really be as iconic as they are. It might have just been, a something to remind you of a team that wasn't very good in the 90s. But Shaq's impact on the Orlando Magic, on like their impact in like even fashion. Like it is a very iconic jersey. But like his impact on the city of Orlando, like Orlando is not the like metropolitan area that it is without Shaquille O'Neal coming and playing for the Magic. So obviously awesome on the court, played an MVP level, every year that he was here, helped the team get to the finals. But as much as he impacted the team off the floor, you could almost argue that his lasting impact is more like the culture of the Magic and the way that those teams are remembered.
I will also add, I mean, obviously, Shaquille O'Neal, part owner of the Magic, along with Dennis Scott. So congrats to them. And if you guys are aware, obviously, of the comments, listeners, I'm sure Shaquille O'Neal making that comment. I don't even know if it was tongue in cheek. I think that he genuinely meant it. That they still run the organization, which was hilarious. But I mean, yeah, all warranted number 2 spot. There's going to be people that have him at 1, and that's totally fine. But Kevin, you will give us the Dwight Howard rundown, and I hope after hearing the difference in accolades, Shaq very decorated, very accomplished with the Orlando Magic, but truthfully doesn't hold much of a candle to Dwight Howard at 1.
The last thing I'll say about Shaq before we talk about our surprise number 1 pick, no, just kidding. When I think about kind of what you mentioned, Jonathan, about the importance of Shaq kind of off the court, I think about other teams that came into the league about the same time, like late 80s into the 90s. Teams like the Timberwolves, teams like, pretty sure Vancouver Grizzlies came in during that time as well. Like, think about how those teams are remembered or not even remembered at all. Like, how are the Timberwolves remembered? The Timberwolves are remembered as being bad forever. And even with KG, they couldn't even really do much. They were a one-trick pony. That's all they had, and the rest of the team was bad. Vancouver Grizzlies literally don't exist anymore. You think about kind of those teams in that era, that very well could be the Orlando Magic today if it wasn't for Shaq. And I would say it probably would be, And so we're very grateful. Obviously, we're very grateful for Shaq and his persona, his swagger, like you mentioned, Jonathan. And it was very important to not just the franchise, but the entire city in Central Florida. But we have reached number 1. There's no debate in this trio of who it is. It's Dwight Howard. Jonathan, you remember the days back when we had Patreon? Well, we still have Patreon. Back when the Patreon list was a little shorter, you try to read it all in one breath. I am going to attempt to read these accolades that Jonathan has so graciously compiled for us. I'm going to read these in one breath. The Dwight Howard accolades. I'm going to try. I haven't tried this yet. I don't know if it's possible. We'll see. Dwight Howard, 8 seasons, 621 games, 57 playoff games, 18.4 points, 13 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1 steal, 2.2 blocks, 87.5 win shares, 3rd all-time Magic games played, 1st in free throws, 1st in rebounds, 4th in steals, 1st in blocks, 1st in points, 1st in win shares, 6-time All-Star, 3 times Defensive Player of the Year, 4 times NBA rebound leader, 2 times NBA block leader, 6 times All-NBA, 5 times All-Defense, 4 straight years in top 5 MVP voting, part of the 2009 Finals team. Oh, so close, dang it. That's Dwight Howard, folks. And just to clarify that last section especially, 6-time All-Star, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 4-time NBA rebound leader, 2-time NBA block leader, 6-time All-NBA, 5-time All-Defense, 4 straight years in top 5 MVP voting. Part of the 2009 Finals team. There's a lot that sticks out. The 3 times Defensive Player of the Year in a row, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, back to back to back. That's insane. And obviously, you think about the Magic stats. 8 seasons, 621 games, 57 playoff games. And obviously, he's first in a bunch of stats and stuff. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start. Like, I hope the debate has been rested. And so we don't feel like we have to sit here and defend Dwight Howard. But at least let's talk about Dwight Howard from the stance of like him being number 1, what he's meant to this organization, what he's meant to the fan base. And obviously he's been in the news a lot this summer as well with the Magic. I don't know about the news, but at least the rumor mill. So Luke, we'll start with you. Like Dwight Howard, number 1 greatest Orlando Magic player of all time.
There will be debate. There will be comments. There will be just vitriol and people that just still hate Dwight Howard. I think we have very well made it clear that this has since shifted, especially since as of late, They get together at the Stan Van Gundy at his wife's funeral, celebration of life. There are people that I genuinely think it moved the needle for them. Dwight and all of his comments about, loving Orlando, always having love, wouldn't mind coming back, retiring in Orlando. Dwight Howard, well deserved of this number one spot, in my opinion. There's just not like much that you can say about this guy that, I think that there's parallel, and that this is not from a talent standpoint, so do not get this twisted, please. But there's a parallel between like how beloved, I think people forget how much people loved Dwight Howard during the playing days, and then he leaves, and then how it happened, whatever. On a much smaller scale, it's probably maybe how people scoffed at where we had Aaron Gordon. Oh man, they have this bad taste in their mouth because of the exit. But when you were there, you loved them. In dunk contest, nobody was defending Aaron Gordon more than Magic fans. Dwight Howard, during his time in Orlando, nobody was rooting harder, obviously, than Magic fans. Love the guy because he put us on the map again, right? Shaq, Penny, all of that is done. And then you just are waiting for another star player. Dwight Howard comes along, and in just 2 seasons, in his 3rd season, he becomes an all-star. And averaging 17 points per game, 12 rebounds. He had already been putting up similar numbers the year before and in his 2nd year. This guy just changed the landscape of this franchise in a way that you talk about Shaq and the relevancy of the Magic and how much he helped it. Dwight Howard kept this organization afloat. And it's what you talked about as well, Kevin, and what we really had mentioned and cited from you was people forget that he really played a part in keeping Orlando in Orlando. He played a huge part. That's what a lot of these guys in the top 5 have. They've had more than just the impact on the court because their presence and their production has been personified and magnified due to just their presence. So Dwight Howard, number one for me. Jonathan, what's your thoughts on Dwight and any closing statements about it?
Yeah, when you compare the resume, between Shaq and Dwight, I don't think it's a debate, but if you're going to, like, Shaq arguably had like Hall of Fame career here in Orlando, 4-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, scoring champ, 4 years in top 10 MVP voting, went to the finals, all that. Dwight like doubles what Shaq does in Orlando. Like, he's here twice the amount of time, obviously, which we talked about longevity is a huge part of this. But Dwight's resume, it's just almost overwhelming. Like, for people that forget about just how good Dwight Howard was, like 6 straight years All-Star from 2007 to 2012. Kevin talked about it, the back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year. It's never been done before. I don't know that it will ever be done again. I think the guy that had the best chance at it was Rudy Gobert, and now he's fallen off a little bit, but just when you look at the accolades, first in free throws, first in rebounds, fourth in steals, first in blocks, first in points, first in win shares, like just again and again and again, it's like, how obvious is it that this guy has done more in pinstripes by a mile and a half compared to anyone else in our franchise's history? And that's not to poo-poo them or to downgrade them at all. Like, that's just how good Dwight Howard was. And yes, had the rough exit, has at least started to make an effort to patch things up. But if you love the Orlando Magic, if you love being able to go to games in Orlando, you wouldn't be able to do that if it was not for Dwight Howard. The team very, very most likely would be in another city at this point. Orlando would not have, and without the Magic here, does the Orlando City come to Orlando? Maybe not. I don't know. Like, Orlando may not have any professional sports teams if it were not for Dwight Howard. So I know, we've tried to play as much of a role as we could in sort of shedding light on how much Dwight has meant to this organization. And, people are warming up to Dwight once again, but it is not even close, folks. Dwight Howard is by far and away the greatest Magic player of all time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Luke talked about it. The bad taste in the mouth, I think, skewed some people's perspectives for a long time. But I think now, I would hope now, the time has healed some of that. We can look back and say, just look at on paper. It is what it is. Now, again, greatest versus best is very valid in this conversation. I believe Shaquille O'Neal is the best player in Magic history. I think he is the best. If I wanted to win a championship and I had to pick between Orlando Shaq and Orlando Dwight, I would pick Orlando Shaq. Like that, I don't think many people would argue with that. But when you talk about greatest, you talk about the resume. It's Dwight Howard. It's not even close until, maybe one of our current Magic guys surpasses him at number one. Jonathan, what do we think? Maybe some guys on this roster that could maybe move up the list this year?
Yeah, it's a tough task, to ask. Like, hey, we need you to be better than Dwight Howard. We need you to have a better career than Dwight Howard. And like as we were going through this list, like some of the things that stick out, some of the Magic records, like records that'll never be broken. Scott Skiles, 30 assists. I think that's safe. I just don't see anybody ever getting 30 assists again. And as sad as it is, like looking at, Nick Anderson with 692 games played for the Magic, like in today's NBA, in today's day and age, that just really doesn't happen. So like some of these, stats and records, I think are going to stand the test of time. But we look at guys like Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner. If there are any guys on this roster that have a chance one day to enter into the top 5 or to supplant Dwight as the greatest Magic player of all time, on this current roster, it would have to be one of those two guys for me. But, we had a lot of these young guys at the bottom of the list. Paolo Banchero at 35, Wendell at 33, Markelle at 32, Franz at 31. I think those guys have a real chance, especially if they make it into the playoffs this year, to end up, passing a guy like DJ Augustine or Steve Francis or Victor Oladipo and move into the top 25.
They're in looking at this, that group at the, like you were just mentioning, Jonathan, that group and from starting from 35, Paolo, Wendell, Markelle, Franz Wagner, there are guys ahead of them that have worse counting stats than them. But what do they have? They have longevity. They have playoff appearances. If these guys, as much as I do, I believe that this is going to be the case, these guys, I think they are all going to, for the most part, stick around. When you talk about Paolo, Dell, Markelle, and Franz Wagner, I hope that's the case. We hope that's the case. Maybe at some point push comes to shove and one of these guys might get kind of bumped out of there. I don't see a reason Wendell does except for health. If he continues to struggle with health. Markelle Fultz much of the same, but also I just think that, if there's a point guard that comes along at some point as young or an Anthony Black, something like that, like really blossoms, develops maybe more of a perimeter shot at that point, you could see Markelle Fultz not be in this group that makes this jump. But I think when it is all said and done, there's a real possibility that these guys find themselves in the range of the, JJ Redick, Jameer, Richard, all of these guys because of the longevity, but also the playoff appearances. And that's what we want. We want them to just rack up postseason reps as much as they can. I genuinely think that one of them, if not two, can get into the top 5 when this is all said and done. I think guys like Dell can get into the top 10 when it's all said and done. I don't know about Markelle. That's the one I have reservations about because I just don't know what the future holds. I would love for him to be around. I just don't know. But it is fun to think about where do these guys end up? And that's genuinely where I think these guys have a great shot of going if the trajectory of this team is what we think it is.
Yeah, I think obviously we look at the top guys. There are some fringe guys too that I think maybe have a chance to sneak into some of the earlier numbers. You think about a guy like Jonathan Isaac, who has longevity on the roster, obviously has not played in the number of games that we'd prefer. But if he goes out there this season, plays 60, 70 games, gets to the playoffs, is a contributor on defense. I know, Jonathan, we were talking earlier and you were mentioning that he's already top 10 in blocks, I think you said, even though he hasn't played that many games. And even just by the eye test, one of the best defenders in Magic history already. So he's a guy that I think, obviously, how the next season and maybe 2 seasons go for him, he could start to work his way into that conversation, especially based on longevity and stuff. But obviously, like you said, those guys near the top, it's a Franz and Paolo thing for me. Like how far up this list can those guys go? And that's going to determine the trajectory of this team and the franchise and all kind of stuff. But it's exciting that we're just around the corner from seeing the next chapter of those guys' career in Orlando. So definitely excited for that.
Yeah, I would say J.I. is positioned, if he can have a healthy season, maybe push himself into the list here. Cole Anthony is another guy that I think has another good season, or maybe another probably 2 good seasons. He's a guy that I could see on this list as well. And we got 5 years. We'll be doing the 40 greatest Magic players of all time, so the list will expand a little bit. But I definitely expect those 3 in particular that you mentioned, Luke, Franz, Paolo, Wendell. Next time we do this list, those guys should be somewhere in the 20s. I would guess, unless they've got a couple of rings under their belt, and then I'll put that entire roster 1 through 13, for winning championships. I really don't care, and anybody that argues, like, you can't argue with a ring. So, but guys, this was a lot of fun. 35th anniversary season. We'll continue to have conversations like this, throughout this season, and as the 35 seasons for the Magic are being celebrated. So we would love to hear your guys' thoughts, whether it's on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're consuming the content here. Love to know your thoughts. Do you agree with us? Do you disagree with us? Who would you put in this list that we didn't? Who's in this list that we put that you would remove? And it better not be Evan Fournier, because the stats don't lie. So, but anything else on this list, guys, before we wrap it up?
Yeah, not for me. It's a fun walk down memory lane, and excited to see what memories lie ahead for us, boys.
Kev, the point that you made earlier, like when you think of 35 greatest Magic players of all time, like, can we get to 35 even? Like, that was a thought for me. But especially once you start to get into the 20s, you're like, we've had some good guys here. Forget what everybody else says. And, maybe we haven't always had the team success to show that. We don't have, the Mount Rushmore that maybe like the Lakers do, right?
Right.
We've had a lot of guys that have played here for a long time and have produced in their time here. Maybe not everything always came together from a team success aspect. We've had a good mixture of that, like good individual guys that had a lot of team success here, guys that just played here for a long time. So this was really fun to go through, and we appreciate everyone for listening.
And sorry, one more thing. You just made me think about it. Like, one more thing, just reminiscing on this history. How many NBA teams would trade their 35 years for ours?
True.
It's a lot. It's a lot. You think about it. Obviously, we've had some rough sections. We're coming out of one. But we have had 2 elite eras and some of the most fun basketball in the league. They were good teams, but they were really fun. So how many teams? Yeah, we think about the Lakers and stuff. They're different. The Lakers, Celtics, the other 28 teams. Okay, and the Spurs. Those 3. And the Bulls in the 90s. You take all those away.
Maybe the Pistons in the 80s.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying in our 35 years, before that is whatever. How many franchises would change their history for ours over 35 years? Most of them. We're very fortunate. Sometimes it doesn't always feel like that, especially in the last few years. We're very fortunate. And again, the future is as bright here as it is anywhere else in the league. So it's pretty awesome.
And I'm sorry, we could talk forever, and we just might. I looked up like the worst franchises, because there's like trolls would hear you say that, Kevin, would be like, the Orlando Magic, like you're 35 years, really? I pulled up like the worst 5 franchises. Magic don't even sniff it. Like, don't even sniff it. Nope. And all you have to do is go by like finals appearances, right? Like Timberwolves, 0 finals appearances. Clippers, Charlotte, Memphis, New Orleans Pelicans. Like, there are so many of these teams, and you can get into even playoff appearances from that point. The Magic still blow those guys out of the water in just the 35 years that the Magic have been around. Yeah. So, yeah, to your point, absolutely. The Magic, there are many, many, many teams, whether they want to just crap on the Magic because of the last 10 years or not, they can suck it, quite frankly, because the last 35 years have been way better than theirs.
Even a storied franchise like the Knicks. The Knicks would have killed to go to the finals twice in the last 35 years. They haven't been since 71 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and they've been three total times. Is this correct? Is that that's how many championships they have?
I might be making
but they
stuff up.
haven't. No, you're right. I mean, it is baffling, genuinely, that the Knicks haven't seen much success since the 70s. But yeah, the last 35 years they would kill to have been in the finals twice.
And yeah, we've had a rough stretch the last 10 years, but before that stretch, the Magic made the playoffs more years than they missed the playoffs.
That's right.
So yeah, we've been a bit of the laughing stock of the league the last decade. But I mean, how many franchises can say they've had guys as iconic as Dwight and Shaq and Penny and Tracy McGrady
and Pat Garrity?
Pat Garrity. You have no idea how bad I wanted to slip Michael Doliak into this list for you.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I could not figure a way to make it happen, unfortunately.
I go.
Also, the next 2 championships in 77 seasons. So
there you go.
Yeah, we've been pretty close in 35 here, but yeah. Here's to the last 34 going into the 35th here, and here's also to the next 35, and hopefully when we're talking about the 70 greatest Magic players, we can talk about a few handful of champions, and that list would be really great. I don't know that I can go 35 more years without a title. I don't know.
Yeah. I just
right,
one more thing. I'm just kidding. That's it.
One more thing. We're going to wrap up this one. For Luke, Sylvia, and Kevin Tucker, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to The Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!